You've ruined my entire evening. That shout tore through the restaurant's elegant atmosphere, drawing every eye to the server standing frozen in place. But no one knew that this woman had been working 14-hour days, teaching classes by morning and washing dishes by night just to earn enough money to buy her son a new pair of shoes. And the moment she was publicly shamed before dozens of patrons, instead of bowing her head, she lifted her chin and spoke a line that fell like a shockwave through the room. A sentence that struck straight at the heart of the millionaire and changed her life forever. A chill wind swept through the brick-paved streets of the Garden District, slipping between wrought-iron fences and silvered shutters. New Orleans was settling into the gentle cold of an autumn evening. Yet amid that breeze, a woman pedaled silently past the old houses, streetlights casting their glow on her sun-tanned cheekbones and in eyes that still burned with quiet fire. Luciana Reyes, 30 years old and a single mother of Puerto Rican heritage, wore a thin, threadbare jacket and slung over her shoulder a tote bag neatly holding her folded server's uniform. Since dawn, she had been teaching children at a modest private school on the east side, guiding their Spanish pronunciation with patient smiles while masking her exhaustion. And now, as every evening, she was beginning her second shift in a wholly different world, the Maison de Lune restaurant. There, crystal glasses glimmered under candlelight, and smooth jazz floated from the corner as if every emotion had been choreographed in advance. Maison de Lune was no place for someone like her. Yet night after night, she showed up not to dine, but to serve. Luciana didn't own a late-model car. She had no Instagram with thousands of followers. She didn't frequent spas, didn't check in, didn't indulge in dreams. Instead, she possessed invisible treasures, composure, perseverance, and a quiet pride so subtle that few noticed. She arrived an hour early each night. No one asked her to, but she reminded herself, if you're going to do it well. Glasses must shine, forks must align along the invisible seam between tablecloth folds. While the dining room lay empty, she savored the silence, polishing glasses, straightening chairs, studying the menu as though learning a secret language. No one saw her then. Yet in those unseen hours, Luciana honed a kindness so steadfast it could not be feigned. Everything she did served one purpose. Luca, her 8-year-old son, hair perpetually tousled, eyes as clear as autumn raindrops. Whenever Luciana came home late, he'd often already be asleep, still clutching his Mickey Mouse storybook. And each morning, bleary-eyed, he'd chirp, "Mom, when are we really going to Disneyland?" Not the one in his book, but the real Disneyland, with fireworks and castles. She never made promises. She did not lie. But after each shift, she slipped a few coins into a plastic jar on the kitchen shelf, its label scribbled by Luca's hand. Our magic fund. To many, that dream might seem small, but to her, it was the destination, the reason she refused to give up. Luciana had heard people say, poor women should know their place and keep quiet. Yet within her burned a steady flame, not fierce or brilliant, but enduring. It was the fire of someone underestimated and disregarded, yet determined to work with the kindest heart. Not for praise, but so she could hold her head high as she watched her child grow. That evening, she entered Maison de Lune as usual, hair neatly pinned, uniform redolent of inexpensive detergent, steps light yet resolute. She had no idea that in just a few hours, this quiet stage of jazz melodies would become the arena where her inner fire would face its fiercest trial yet. Could her devotion withstand the weight of contempt? Or was something within Luciana about to awaken in a way even she hadn't anticipated?
Welcome to 30 Millionaire Stories, where success meets solitude, and every story heals a hidden wound. Subscribe and discover the heart behind the fortune.
Saturday night is the most expensive night at Maison de Lune. From the moment dusk crests the horizon, The entire restaurant is bathed in soft golden candlelight, like a love song rendered in illumination. Outside, the streets still glisten with drifting rain, but inside, the music seems to dissolve every chill. An elderly saxophonist stands in the corner, coaxing slow jazz notes that stretch time itself. The scent of grilled meat lingers in the air, mingling with the aroma of fine wine and the leather scent from guests' coats hung on the backs of chairs. Luciana glides between tables like a shadow beneath the lights, a reservation book cradled in her arm, her hair carefully pinned high. Tonight, she was assigned to the ground floor as usual. But just minutes after preparing her first tray, the manager appears face taut with tension. The server on the upper floor has called in sick, and only one person in the shift has the experience to step in immediately. Her. Luciana's heart skips a beat. She nods, no hesitation, yet no rush. She knows well that the VIP area on the second floor is nothing like her usual section. It is where chairs bear individual nameplates, where no guest waits more than 3 seconds for a wine top-off, where those seated could buy this entire building if they wished. And table 14 is always the hottest seat in the house. Ascending to the second floor, she moves swiftly along the plush-carpeted corridor, warm light reflecting off classical oil paintings on the walls. At the end lies a private dining room, silent, luxurious to the point that even the air seems appraised. Centered within, table 14 stands like the main stage, and, seated there, back to the door, is the man every soul at Maison de Lune knows by name, Chase Donovan. Luciana recognized him the first time she saw him in the financial pages of the New York Times. A tailored charcoal suit hugs his shoulders. A gold-plated watch gleams at his wrist. His hair is combed back, his spine rigid, and his gaze so commanding it silences anyone in its path. He is conversing in English, peppered with Japanese phrases with a younger man, likely a partner. 2 glasses of ruby red wine have been poured but barely touched. Luciana approaches, gently places the menus just so exactly 2 fists' width from the table edge. She can feel every breath, measured by the invisible stairs in that room. Each step, each gesture is a performance in which a single misstep could blacklist her forever. She reads the atmosphere around the table like sheet music. No one shouts, no clinking of glasses or plates, yet the tension hangs like an invisible net, keeping every sense on high alert. She cannot afford a mistake. Not tonight, not at this table. Chase Donovan, dubbed by Forbes the King of No Man's Land, is a living legend in real estate. He buys dilapidated neighborhoods and turns them into upscale districts within a year. But behind applause lie whispers that he forgives no error, that a single furrow of his brow can cost a restaurant its contract, and that anyone serving him must understand he doesn't pay for kindness. He pays for perfection. Luciana tightens her grip on her reservation book, draws her pen ready for orders. She reveals no fear, but inside, a voice whispers, "Don't make a mistake just tonight. Don't make a mistake." Behind her, the jazz still hums, now softer. It feels as though the entire room holds its breath, as if every note, every shaft of light, waits for some catalyst to change its tone. Luciana doesn't yet know that in the next few minutes, a single drop of water, purely accidental, will be enough to bring everything crashing down. Wait one small favor. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy inspirational stories. And don't forget to leave a comment telling me, where are you watching from? And what time is it where you live? I always love seeing the world come together to share a meaningful moment. Luciana stood motionless before table 14, inhaling deeply before she stepped forward. She knew the rules here. Each footfall must be as soft as silk, each gesture as precise as a Swiss watch. Everything had to be subtle yet invisible. like the air itself, like the jazz murmuring up from below. She had served for 5 years, from small eateries on Bourbon Street to French-style restaurants like Maison de Lune. All those experiences, long nights in cheap high heels, silencing her tears when patrons looked down on her, flowed now through her poised posture and steady gaze. Chase Donovan sat there like a statue cast in power. His silver-gray suit bore not a crease. The Patek Philippe on his wrist reflected candlelight as a silent testament to status. He did not look up. His finger tapped the tabletop in a rhythm not of music, but of millions passing by each minute of negotiation. Luciana paused, inclined her head slightly, and spoke in a quiet but courteous tone. "I'm Luciana. It's my pleasure to serve you this evening." Her words were cut off. "Bring me a bottle of 2003 Cabernet Sauvignon. If you don't have it, don't waste my time." No glance upward. No eye contact. The command hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Luciana nodded once, then turned to leave. Her heart did not flutter. She was accustomed to guests like him, those so engrossed in their own worlds they forgot. They spoke to another human being. In the wine cellar, she selected the exact bottle he requested. She verified the vintage, inspected the seal, wiped the neck, and placed it on a silver tray alongside 2 chilled Bordeaux glasses. She allowed no detail to slip. Returning to table 14, the room remained hushed. The two men's conversation continued English laced with Japanese phrases. Luciana set the bottle down, twisted it so the label faced him by the book, and slowly poured the first glass, her eyes tracking every movement. Then, the unthinkable happened. As she placed the second glass on the table, a single droplet of condensation from the chilled glass fell onto the pristine white tablecloth, tiny enough that most would not notice. But to Chase Donovan, it was a fuse. He looked down. His gaze traced the droplet. Then he raised his head. His pupils flared with anger, as though fire had met gunpowder. He brought his palm down on the table. Not a loud slam, but decisive enough to make the wine tremble, a heartbeat that felt like an explosion. The room shifted. The jazz played on, but in a parallel dimension, distant, irrelevant. All eyes snapped toward table 14. No one spoke, but everyone heard. "What kind of restaurant do you think this is?" His voice was calm, yet each word cut the air like a blade. "I'm negotiating millions, and you spill water on my tablecloth?" He pointed at the droplet nearly dry, but that didn't matter. Not to him. "Had you worked for my company, you'd be fired before you could even say, 'I'm sorry.'" Luciana remained standing, hands clasped before her apron. She did not speak. She did not react. But to anyone observant, they would see in her eyes not fear, but a familiar ache. At the far end of the room, the manager rose silently. Her face had gone pale. Some diners looked down, feigning indifference, though that very silence spoke louder than 1,000 stares. Luciana stayed still. She did not cry, nor did she bow her head. Not because she was stronger than anyone else, but because she was too used to swallowing excuses to keep her paycheck. Yet tonight, something was rising within her. And in just one more second, a real droplet from her heart. Not the glass would fall, but not tears. Dear audience, please relax or take a sip of water, then stay tuned for the next unexpected turn. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the story, so we know you're still here. In the moment Luciana's hands were still clasped before her apron, the room felt frozen in its own universe where the candlelight no longer flickered, where the music seemed swallowed by silence. The insults that had just echoed still hung in the air, yet no one dared repeat them. Chase Donovan sat upright, his expression shifting from irritation to anger, then to something harder to name: embarrassment cloaked in power. He lifted his gaze, truly looking at the server who had finally tested his patience. Luciana had learned to bow her head when she was wrong, not because she was weak, but because she understood life isn't always fair, and sometimes silence is the cheapest way to keep one's job. But that night, something inside her refused to stay quiet. Not because of the drop of water on the tablecloth, not because of a millionaire's fury, but because of Luca's eyes, her son, who waited every night for his mother's return, always believing she was the bravest person alive. She raised her head neither too quickly nor too slowly. Her eyes neither trembled nor burned with pride. They were simply calm. Like someone who has lived long enough to know that when you have nothing left to lose, that is when you find your true voice. Facing her was a man accustomed to giving orders, used to making others bow with a glance. But at that moment, he met the gaze of someone who no longer feared judgment. And then Luciana spoke. Not loudly, not sharply, just as gently as a breeze sliding through New Orleans' ancient doors, but strong enough to shake a room built of gold and arrogance. "Sir, you may own every tallest tower in New Orleans, but you cannot buy kindness." Her words did more than interrupt his tirade. They cut through the mask hiding his arrogance. In that instant, time seemed to stretch. The distant saxophone note hung midair. The elderly musician lifted his instrument. Breath paused. A diner carving lamb ribs set down his knife so softly, the blade's tap on porcelain was audible only to those truly silent. Heads turned. Some blinked. Some held their breath. But all sensed it. Something had shifted. Chase Donovan said nothing. His lips tightened. His hand clenched the chair's armrest. His face betrayed his composure, not because he was insulted, but because, for the first time, someone without power, without money, without status had stood tall and spoken what everyone else around him had avoided. Luciana said no more. She offered no apology. She simply stood there in her simple black and white uniform, as though her words needed no further explanation. As if she knew that to speak on would cost her her job, but to remain silent would cost her very self. At a distant corner, the manager who had watched from the start remained motionless. She neither stepped forward nor signaled. Perhaps she too felt this was no longer a matter between guest and staff. This was a moment larger than either, a moment when all values were upended by a single sentence. No one applauded. No one sighed. Only silence, thick, heavy, fell like a weight from the ceiling. Luciana quietly nodded and stepped back, awaiting not his reaction but that of the world he represented. And in that breath-stilled space, a small statement had become thunder. The question now was, who would dare to listen? That night, when Luciana left Maison de Lune, the city was still awake. The lights from the bars down the street reflected off the rain-spotted pavement, catching in her eyes something both relieved and unsettled. She did not know what awaited her ahead. But in her heart was a peculiar feeling as if in some way she had just stepped across a threshold from which there was no return. She did not know that at a nearby table, a young woman, short hair, white earphones, had quietly pulled out her phone the moment she heard the table slam. She had no intention of making a viral video. Only, in that instant, she felt something worth capturing. A moment raw, unscripted, unedited. A moment when a server stood up not to fight, but to remind the world that people should not be trampled simply for the uniform they wear. The video went live on TikTok at 11:53 p.m. The caption read simply, "This server deserves more than 1,000 apologies. Number, respect service workers." By sunrise over the Mississippi River, views had surpassed 1 million. By midday, 3.8 million. And before sunset, the clip hit 7.4 million views, appearing on the For You page of millions across America. Twitter exploded. Tweets shared stories of being looked down upon. Photos of $0 tips with rude notes, messages of thanks to Luciana, all forming an unstoppable wave. Hashtags like number you can't buy kindness, number stand with Luciana, and number respect service workers trended simultaneously, becoming a collective rallying cry from those once dismissed merely for standing by the table instead of sitting at it. That morning, Luciana knew nothing of the online uproar. She only woke early, prepared breakfast for Luca, brushed his hair, and hurried out the door for her shift, her heart still fluttering with last night's words. She was accustomed to the cost of honesty, and years in the service industry had taught her that courage sometimes demands a closed door. Passing through the restaurant's back door, her hand still gripping her tote, Luciana looked around searching for her manager's eye, expecting a summons, perhaps a termination notice. But instead, her usually stern and taciturn manager approached slowly, then offered a gentle smile. "Someone is waiting for you in the lounge," she said. "A very special guest." Luciana frowned. Before she could ask more, the manager turned away, leaving the surprise for her to discover firsthand. The lounge sat apart on the ground floor, reserved for VIPs or private meetings. When Luciana entered, a black woman with her curly hair pinned high stood with her back to the door. As she turned, her eyes shone with warmth and empathy qualities Luciana seldom saw in strangers. "I'm Angela Moore," the woman said softly, "founder of Stand With Servers, and I think you don't yet know what you've accomplished." Angela stepped forward without fanfare. She needed no grand speech. She simply took Luciana's hand, not too tightly, but firmly enough to convey one clear message. "You are not alone." "You don't know how many people you've inspired," Angela said. "They're not just sharing your video, they're telling their own stories. And now, they see you as a symbol of what we've long fought for: respect." Luciana said nothing. She remained silent, not because she had nothing to say, but because her throat was too tight. For the first time in years, someone looked at her not as a server, but as a person of value. Angela unzipped her bag and pulled out an envelope. "We'd like to invite you to be the face of our new campaign," she said. "Not just because you spoke what was right, but because of how you spoke gently, yet impossible to ignore." Luciana did not know what lay ahead, but for the first time in her life she felt she no longer had to lower her head before entering any room. From a familiar figure working in the back kitchen of Maison de Lune, Luciana became an image featured in countless news reports, articles, and viral videos. Not because she spoke like a politician or wielded power like a celebrity, but because she voiced what millions had thought silently yet never dared to say. The service industry, the silent backbone of America's economy, suddenly found itself in the spotlight. Stories of harsh reprimands, tips withheld over an imperfect smile, 12-hour shifts with no breaks, all were being discussed, dissected, and heard. And at the center of that wave stood a woman whose voice was as gentle as the breeze, yet as steadfast as a tree's roots: Luciana Reyes. She was invited to speak at TEDx Boston, one of the most prestigious stages she once believed she'd never touch. In a simple black dress, under soft lighting, she recounted that evening not as an act of revenge, but as a turning point, a moment when self-respect triumphed over the fear of losing her job. NBC booked her for a primetime interview, and the New York Times dubbed her the compassionate icon of the post-pandemic world. But for Luciana, the headlines mattered less than the hundreds of messages she received daily from fellow service workers in small cafes, at airport counters, in casual diners, thanking her for speaking on our behalf. In a world accustomed to treating worker silence as a given, the one who dares to speak with quiet composure delivers a seismic shock. The number You Can't Buy Kindness campaign grew into a nationwide movement. Major restaurants began reevaluating their staff training, guest relations, and minimum wage policies. For the first time, large corporations were compelled to institute clear internal guidelines on how employees and VIP guests should interact. And what of Chase Donovan? A week after the incident, he appeared in a public apology video, his usual confidence replaced by awkward humility. Under public pressure, Donovan Realty's stock price dipped, and several partners announced indefinite pauses in collaboration. Yet what captured the public's attention most wasn't the temporary fall of a millionaire, but the way he looked into the camera, no longer brimming with arrogance. And Luciana? She said nothing, no mockery, no triumphant press interviews. She continued to show up for work on time. She still made breakfast for Luca, still walked him to school, still read him bedtime stories. The only difference was that now, Luca looked at his mother with even greater pride. During one national television appearance, the host asked her, "If you faced Chase Donovan again, what would you say?" Luciana paused for a moment. Not out of hesitation, but as she considered how she wanted to close that chapter not with bitterness, not with hate, but with kindness, something she believed would one day find its way back into the world. She smiled softly. "I would ask him what he learned from the last time he shouted at a server." Her words needed no further comment. They were gentle enough not to demean, yet powerful enough to remind us. Words, spoken at the right time and in the right way, can topple even the most entrenched structures. Luciana did not become a hero she didn't need to. She simply did what was right. And because of that, millions saw in her the symbol of true change, not through force, not by tearing down, but through a tender, undeniable statement. Sometimes, all it takes to change the world is an ordinary person, brave enough to speak the truth precisely when no one else dares to. In a world where silence is often seen as the safe choice, Luciana proved that sometimes a single heartfelt sentence can shake an entire system. Her story isn't merely about a server daring to stand up. It's a gentle yet profound reminder that kindness isn't a privilege, it's a choice. And that choice, no matter who you are, can start with you. If you have ever been looked down upon, swallowing your pride behind a polite smile, this story is for you. And if you've never considered how you treat those who serve you, it may be time to pause and listen. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. If something here touched your heart, please leave a comment below. Share this story with anyone you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow the channel because every week we bring you true stories that are full of emotion, hope, and very human experiences.